It's a pretty shit day here in Auckland, New Zealand, but luckily yesterday was pretty good. So I went out for a ride with a few of my mates on my new 2017 R6. I wanted to talk about a few things about what it's like to get something like this when you've come from like a LAMS approved bike like my trusty old FZR 250. And I've seen a few videos on the internet which talk about like the cold start issue that you get with these, and I thought I would talk about that first, get it out of the way for some people who might just want to see that and then go away. But I haven't had an issue with it. So you can see temperature's low. It's been sitting for like hours, and hasn't been a problem for me so far. I mean, I've only got 700 kilometers. I don't know what that is in miles because I don't like Imperial. We don't like it here in New Zealand. We're all about that metric. But anyway, going to something like this from this is like night and day. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love this thing. It's amazing for a 250. Revs to 18,500. There's a Honda, there's a Suzuki, there's a Kawasaki from the same era that'll do the same sort of thing. All rated for 45 horsepower versus like, you know, the two-cylinder 250s from back in like the late 2000s before we got to 2010 and all that, where everybody started going to, you know, like 300 cc's and whatnot. Well, this one's like 660 or 655 or something for the Learner Improved MT10, MT07. Anyway, those things were like 33 horsepower versus 45. So it was a bit of a change because this is, you know, 120, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. I struggle to see how some people say that, oh, you know, the 600 is a bit on the weak side, you know, and you really sort of need to go to a leader bike. I mean, that's simply not true. I mean, this thing, you'll get a speeding ticket on the motorway in first gear, you'll lose your license in second gear, and, you know, it'll go up to, like, they're limited to 260, and that's electronically. I'm pretty sure this will do over 260 kilometers an hour, and anybody who's got like extended experience with an R6 will probably be able to confirm that. And another thing is, for starters, these mirrors are actually really good. This is like metal. Feels like cast iron, like it's made out of American V8 block or something. So I've got faith in those should I go down. Hopefully I don't. A lot of people have said, you know, oh, you should do like a hard break-in. And so, you know, who was it? Moto Man, I think it was. He's got a website with a whole bunch of that sort of stuff. And I'm skeptical about most things that I read on the internet. So I decided to do a bit of research, and I found Matt from the workshop, his channel. He's got a 3-part series on why you should not do a hard break-in, and that, you know, when people refer to the manual, they say do a soft break-in, or they call it a soft break-in in comparison. Whereas he sort of said that the recommended in the manual, or the manufacturer recommended, was actually more of a sort of medium break-in. So I decided to go with that because he made some very convincing points on on his videos. So I've got the manual here, and one thing that a lot of people say is that you know, the manual says don't go over blah 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 RPM for first 1,000 kilometers, etc., etc., etc. In this manual here, first 1,000 kilometers, avoid prolonged operation above 8,300 RPM, and then at 1,000 to 1,600 avoid prolonged operation above 9,900 RPM. Keyword being prolonged. So I will admit I've gone over that, but you know, if Yamaha say prolonged, to me that says it's okay. Just don't be obviously ringing the shit out of it for, you know, hours on end. Not saying that I'd spend like, you know, more than a minute above that, but because quite honestly most of the time I don't anyway. People often say, you know, oh, below 10,000 RPM these things don't have any guts, and I find myself, you know, not finding that true. Maybe in comparison to this, you know, isn't exactly a good comparison, but I'm finding that below 8,000 RPM I'm getting up to, you know, the speed limit pretty quick. And on the track, you know, how often are you going to be below it anyway? Not that often. So yeah, I've been going over that 10,000 RPM, not for prolonged periods of times, just like the manual says. And if something goes wrong, and Yamaha have a problem with that, and I don't think anything will go wrong, it's their wording in the manual, you know. So they wouldn't put something like that in there if they weren't too sure of it. Other than that, this is a brilliant bike. It's bloody uncomfortable to cruise on. It's like, I thought this was bad to cruise on, but this is actually like really comfortable compared to this. This sits a lot higher than this. I can actually stand on 2 feet and sort of like, oh, give it a good stretch out. This, I can sort of, you know, I stand up and it's almost like I'm still on the seat. But when you're actually on it, you know, giving it the beans, then, you know, you're sort of in a more sort of neutral seating position, and it feels much better. It's when you're cruising, you've got so much weight through your wrists, you're sort of moving around on your ass, pulling up your left ass cheek, try and get a bit of blood flowing back in there, and then onto your left ass cheek to get a bit of blood flowing into your right ass cheek. And people behind you are like, what the hell is he doing? And it's like, I'm just trying to make myself feel comfortable and not succeeding. And the other cool thing is this came with the quick shifter, and I was kind of skeptical about this at first, like, you know, I don't mind, you know, like whipping in the clutch and pulling up my gear, just like you traditionally do. But when you experience it, it's a whole different story. Because when you're sort of, you know, on the gas, like, and then you just kick it up, the engine stays in power because there's no sort of lag when you pull in, and, you know, the momentum starts to decrease because, you know, you're pulling the clutch in, there's no more power to the rear wheel, you're in the middle of changing a gear and then releasing the clutch, then the engine sort of has to, you know, wind up, you know, get all the airflow going in and the exhaust flow going out, the scavenging effect of the exhaust, blah blah blah, getting all that back into sync, because, you know, it's just an instant gear change and you just feel that power just staying on, and it's actually a really great feeling. Oh, it just makes it fly a whole lot more. Another thing I thought I would talk about is the stock exhaust. Now, obviously, this thing with this exhaust, which is basically, you can't see, but a straight pipe with a few kind of like those little scallopy kind of things on the inside to baffle, and these kind of revs, it sounds like a Formula 1 car slowly making its way down the road. Well, I say slowly, compared to other 250s it's pretty good, you know, comparatively speaking. And I thought, you know, this stock exhaust is probably going to sound like crap, but it actually is pretty good. I mean, you see a lot of videos, you know, from like Motonosity and 650E on YouTube. They've done like quite a bit of coverage. Also, 650E got the right color, I have to say. And what you hear in the video just doesn't do it justice. It sounds a lot better in person, and yeah, I'm pretty impressed with it. I mean, I'm eventually probably going to get an Acra system, Um, when I get used to what the bike has, I mean, it feels like insane acceleration. You know, you get people like old Jason Statham from 44 Teeth saying, you know, he gets to the end of the sort of rev range and it's a bit but for somebody who is new to, you know, a 600cc super sport after being on a 250 sport, it just feels incredible. And I hate to think the sort of trouble I'd get myself into, you know, because I'm a calculated risk guy. So I'm not pushing myself too far just yet. But eventually I would like to get an Acra system, because I think that it, like, you know, when I've got a feel for the bike and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm sort of, you know, getting a handle of this, and, you know, oh, maybe I'd like a bit more power, I can just do that, you know, and from what everybody sees, that's going to make a huge difference. The brakes, oh my god, the brakes, it's like you just, and then whoosh, it wants to stop. Like, this thing, you're almost right at the end, there's a bit of pressure, and then whoop, now you feel it, and then there's just like, I guess that's the term that people use when they say wooden. You know, it's almost as if somebody has just gotten two wooden blocks and just gone like on here, and that's it. But on this, the brakes are just amazing. Just touch it, I could like one finger it, that's what she said, and away she goes, or not, away she goes. Now, for sort of like, I don't know, the practical rider, I don't think anybody has sort of discussed insurance. Here in New Zealand, Yamaha have Yamaha insurance, and I went through a broker friend of mine who is really good at finding good deals, and to insure this, the best he could do, I paid $19,299 for this, New Zealand dollars. My premium was $950, and my excess was about $900, and an additional $1,000 for theft or attempted theft, which is, as you can tell, 10% of the value of the bike as new, which seemed pretty insane. So when I was picking the bike up, I said, oh yeah, I wanted to discuss Yamaha insurance. And they said, sure, we can do that for you. We'll get a quote. It'll take 5 minutes to get you a quote, and then we can see what you want to do. So they punch everything in, and they come back and they say, okay, this will be $657 a year, and it will have a $250 excess, flat excess, no additional charge for theft or attempted theft or anything like that. Anybody who has a full New Zealand rider's license, motorcycle license, is allowed to ride it, and it'll still be just $250 if they crash it, you know, so there's no sort of nominated driver sort of scheme where only like you and your partner, or, you know, your nominated mate can ride it. So that's really good. Another thing that New Zealand does, I'm not too sure if they do this anywhere else, like in other parts. Maybe they do it in Australia, I don't know, but they do what's called Yamaha DNA, which is basically just like those data dots. You know, they're everywhere on this thing, so if it gets stolen, it's going to be pretty easy. You know, parts start coming up online. Yamaha are that confident in it, that's why they have that $250 flat excess with no additional theft excess, because they're pretty confident that it's going to be recovered. So yeah, if you're thinking of stealing my bike, please don't, for your sake, of course, well, and obviously mine. I think that pretty much covers it. Yeah, from the point of view as somebody who's gone from, you know, a learner approved bike here in New Zealand, if you're not from New Zealand or Australia and you don't know what that is, it's pretty much, in the past, we were not allowed to ride anything over 250cc 4-stroke for our while we were on our learner's license and restricted license. If you were on your learner's license, you had to have one of these bad boys pinned to your back, and you weren't allowed to ride before 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. and not allowed to ride after 10 p.m. When you get on your restricted, that all changes, and by that I mean you don't have to have an L plate, and that's it. And then once you get your full, it's go nuts. So I've had that bike for about 3 years. I love it. It's not as fast or as fun as this. This is incredibly nimble. For like, it's 190 kgs wet. I think that's like 144 kgs wet. You can feel the difference when you're just like, trying to move this back and forth over this. You can feel the wind pushing you around in that. But this is just as agile as this. Like when you're just going, on the handlebars, moving around. It's incredibly agile. As I've said, aluminium instead of steel, magnesium instead of steel subframe. It's like 1 kilo heavier with like the ABS, the traction control, the massive freaking cat for Euro 4 standards. But it's all sort of moved down, so it's got a lower center of gravity. And even though it's quite heavy, you can still feel that it's really, really agile. And that being said, this is still a really agile bike, and I've had a lot of fun on it, been on a lot of rides with mates. And it's one of those ones that you really have to work to get your speed when you're keeping up with other people on bigger bikes. And I think that's probably one of the things that put me off like a litre bike is for starters, registration on bikes from, I think it's like 61 or 51 cc's up to 600 and including is $470 a year. Anything 601cc and above is $580 a year. So it's pretty pricey. But there's also that it's heavier, and people just, I kind of like working for my speed, whereas like something like an R1, you're going to be pretty bloody quick, without having to chop and change too many gears, just because it's got so much more torque and so much more power. I mean, this is like 100 horsepower at the wheels, whereas like I think the R1 is like between 160 and 170 from what I see most people dynoing them at, or 120 at the crank-ish, or 116 at the crank, whatever it is, splitting hairs, versus 200 at the crank for the R1. There's just so much more power, and I don't know, this apparently has sort of like a bit more agility. There are people like Motonosity, he's got an R1, the previous generation, and he jumped on this when he got it, and he thought it was like, a lot lighter and felt sort of like a lot more fun on the street. So yeah, that's part of why I decided to go for the R6. I just love the look. Like, I've always wanted the R6, and people are going to kill me for saying this, but I did not like the look of the previous generation. Post your hate comments now. Sorry. I just felt like with those eyes and that mouth, it kind of looked like a praying mantis. And then I said to myself, man, if they ever made the R6 over like in the same sort of design style of the R1, I would be all over it. And then they went ahead and did that. And I especially like these LED strips. On the R1, they're just straight. But on the R6, they've got this beautiful curve to them. I think that looks a lot better than the R1. Probably going to cop more hate, but that's just My opinion. I think I've pretty much covered everything that I wanted to say. So if you're looking to get something like this, like coming off your license, coming off your restricted license and getting on your full and getting off, one of those Lunar approved bikes. Although I'm saying that, this is a bloody awesome Lunar approved bike. I cannot believe it's Lunar approved. Lunar approved is now 150 kilowatt per ton, and the amount of torque these things have down low is just nuts. It's nuts. First time I took one for a ride, being that's my sort of usual ride, it felt like it just wanted to wheelie as soon as I cracked the throttle open, just like insane. Very good buy for somebody looking to get their learner plate. Get their first bike. But yeah, hope you enjoyed the video, and hopefully we'll have better days than this ahead, so I can keep taking this bad boy out. Bye.